But joining us right now via phone call is Edward Pentin, a journalist with the National Catholic Register and EWTN, and he has an article out this week called Pfizer and the Vatican. Sources say Pope Francis met privately twice last year with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla, and to have a conversation around that, we've invited him on. Good morning to you, Edward Pentin.
Good morning.
Praise be to God. Thank you for your time today. We're very grateful to you. So, what is the story with these meetings between the CEO of Pfizer and His Holiness Pope Francis?
Well, this is something that's emerged only now. I understand from good sources in the Vatican that Pope Francis met Albert Bourla, who's the CEO of Pfizer, on 2 occasions last year. These weren't disclosed, unlike most meetings the Pope has. They were completely kept private, which is unusual because almost every important person who comes to see the Pope is announced by the press office. This didn't happen. And so these meetings took place basically in secret. That's all we know, really. We don't have any details about, obviously, what they talked about or anything else, but the Vatican hasn't denied it. Pfizer said that they don't have a policy of commenting on these meetings with their CEO. They say they're confidential, so they were unable to confirm or deny it. So so that's basically the long and short of it, that these meetings happened, but we never knew about them.
Did these meetings happen in 2021?
Yes, they did. Yes, I understand they happened last year. I think one early in the year, and I think another one perhaps midway through the year. And of course, the CEO also addressed a Vatican conference in May last year, which was done online, so he didn't actually come here for that. But these meetings he did come here for, and I know this from sources who eyewitness sources who saw it. Is there
a precedent here? I mean, you mentioned a minute ago that the typical action is the press office says, "Hey, the Pope met with so and so," even if they don't tell you what it's about. But is there a precedent for saying that on occasion the Pope does meet with people that they don't disclose, and this might fall into a more innocent category, or is this really standing out as something unusual?
Well, it is. I mean, obviously, a lot of the meetings that do happen, if they do happen at all, we will never know about because they're private and they're kept well under wraps. But we do know that the Pope met Melinda Gates, the former wife of Bill Gates, in November 2019, and that was never disclosed either. That is well known that meeting happened. Very many sources have confirmed it. But you see, these are very rare sort of meetings that sort of leak out afterwards. And that's what's happened in this case.
Mr. Pentin, I'm just curious, maybe to get your take as to what are the implications of a meeting like this? As you mentioned just a few moments ago, there are meetings with high-level ranking people from all over the world, some that we probably don't agree with all too well, but what are the implications in your mind as to what this meeting has?
Well, it's interesting on the main fact that the Vatican has a contract with Pfizer to distribute the vaccines in the Vatican, and they signed this contract in December 2020 with the Governotorate, the governing body of Vatican City State, and it may, you see, it's very much connected with that, but they didn't. We don't know obviously what the details are of the meeting, but it does seem very clear that it's connected with this contract, and that possibly it was done to maybe assuage some concerns about safety. Who knows? It's safety concerns are becoming quite an issue with these vaccines, but also the effectiveness and so forth. So, as I say, we don't know what the contents were, but that could well be part of what was discussed.
Edward, I wanted to sort of get your take on something. So England is rolling back some of their mandates, and I think some other countries in Europe are as well. The Vatican seems to be holding steady here. In fact, we saw the story, or I think it was earlier this week, that Cardinal Parolin was sick as well as others, even though everybody's vaccinated. But I really want to know about the mandates at Vatican City. I've heard reports that there are workers not being paid at this point because they refuse to get the vaccine, and even Swiss guards have been dismissed from service as a result of this. What is the story there?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, this is really the crux of it, I think. It's the mandates which are being enforced at the Vatican and in Italy in a very strong and heavy-handed way. They're being put, basically, you have to get the vaccine now to enter the Vatican. And from the end of January, you had to have the booster as well to work and to enter the Vatican, except for liturgies and paper audiences. But this is becoming quite a major issue because, of course, these problems with the vaccines, the fact they're not so effective as they thought they were, it makes it a problem. And, of course, there's a whole ethical aspect of the abortion link to these vaccines, and yet the Vatican is mandating them. And so even though their own document, issued by the CDF in December 2020, clearly said that mandatory vaccines were not ethical, and yet they're going ahead and doing it. So this is a problem. I did hear from Cardinal Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, who said that these Pfizer vaccines are morally acceptable to use because they only were tested using aborted fetal stem cells. But even though a lot of people will still have problems in conscience taking them, the Vatican is allowing no kind of religious exemption on those grounds. So these are the controversies surrounding this vaccine.
Well, one question comes to mind. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to do that, Edward. But one question that comes to mind is, with all the support for the Pfizer vaccine, which they said is somehow morally acceptable, even though it was tested with aborted fetal tissue. Well, there is apparently a vaccine on the market called Covaxin that had nothing to do with aborted fetal tissues, and yet there's no word about saying, hey, there's a more morally acceptable option. How come they're not promoting that? Why are they continuing to promote the ones that did have abortion-tainted history?
Well, this is a good question, and the fact is there is also this other vaccine called Novavax, which is also doesn't have that ethical concern, but that's never mentioned here. It's never mentioned. Also, the whole issue of aborted-tainted vaccines is never mentioned by the Vatican, not since the CDF document came out in December 2020. So that's a great mystery, and that's also possibly why this meeting happened. It's people are raising questions. Why is the Vatican being so strong on mandating these vaccines? Could it have something to do with these meetings with the CEO of Pfizer last year? There seems to be some sort of contract, some sort of agreement that we don't know about, which says that these vaccines must be mandated. I think a lot of people are scratching their heads wondering how this makes sense, especially given all the questions about this vaccine, and really just questioning whether how ethical is it to have these vaccines mandated, given all these questions. And these are questions I put to Cardinal Parolin, and I hope he'll respond sometime, because he does tend to respond, but of course now he's got COVID, having poor guy, because he's got, even though he was vaccinated 3 times with the booster, but he has caught COVID, and many people have in the Vatican despite these vaccines. So again, this is the problem with these vaccines and the fact that they're trying to mandate them. That's the general feeling here.
Speaking of having 3 vaccines, rumor is that in Israel they're going to be moving toward a mandated 4th booster shot, and they, as you just said, like people who are getting their 3rd shot are already saying that they're already getting it. There's an unreasonable amount of breakthrough cases. And so do you see that as happening in Rome? Is this going to be leading to that direction? And is this tied up exactly with financials, or what's the motivation here?
Well, it's an open question. Who knows, really, if this is related to the financial question, but it does seem to be the case that there's but there's possibly a need for a fourth dose of this vaccine because of these breakthroughs. But the Vatican is not mandating that, not yet at any rate. So we haven't seen that, but that could be something coming down the pike. That's for sure. Yeah.
We have just a couple of minutes left with Edward Pentin, a journalist with the National Catholic Register, who has an article which we'll link to, Pfizer and the Vatican. But here's a question, Edward. What's the sense of the people living in Rome? I mean, in Italy itself, there's been a lot of protest there. We've seen some of that. Has that calmed down, or are the people still frustrated with these green passes, these mandates, and the like?
Yes, they have calmed down, but that's partly because a lot of the population now is vaccinated. They've made it so difficult, really, to just live an ordinary life here that most people have just given in and taken the vaccine. Of course, that means that fewer people are less likely to come out and protest. But it's very much becoming a part of life, and of course, a lot of people are suspecting this is just a pathway to a sort of Chinese-style social credit system. If you go into a cafe, you have to show a green pass just to be able to drink a coffee in that bar. Otherwise, you have to take it away. And there's no possibility of eating at restaurants or going to hotels or gyms or cinemas unless you are vaccinated. So it's quite interesting. And a lot of people well, not a lot, but quite a few people have observed how remarkable it is that people have just sort of complied with this and gone along with it, and not acknowledged the sort of totalitarian element to all of this, and the fact that that's the sort of creeping totalitarianism that may not be able to get rid of. And this is something a few Italians are noticing and speaking up about now, but it's still very much a minority.
We have just about a moment left here. Do you think the Vatican will consider rolling back, given that European countries are starting to roll back? I mean, even Diocese in America has rolled back its vax mandate after the Supreme Court decision recently. What do you think about the Vatican?
Whether they'll reverse it, I don't know. It could happen. Things will change in the spring because it's getting the weather gets better and the spread reduces. But we'll have to see, because it's not. They seem quite intent on pursuing this policy, and I don't see it.
Okay.
There's no signs at the moment of it being reversed yet.
Edward Pentin, we're so grateful to you for being on with us today. Thank you so much. God bless you. Pfizer and the Vatican from the National Catholic Register. We'll link up to it. But we'll be right back. More breaking news and stories coming up next. God bless you, Edward. Have a great day.